Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Courageous Leadership Academy Live. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dr. Kelly Waltman, and on this channel, we cover all things leadership and communication and helping you all just be more courageous leaders. And these live sessions are a real treat for me, and today is no exception. Today we have Sally Helgesen on the show, and I'm just thrilled that she is here to speak with us. Sally is cited in Forbes as the world's premier expert on women's leadership. She is an internationally best-selling author, speaker, and leadership coach. She is ranked number 6 among the world's top 30 leadership thinkers by Global Gurus and number 1 coach for women leaders by Thinkers 50, 50 of 100 coaches. Her most recent book, How Women Rise, co-authored with Marshall Goldsmith, became a bestseller in its category within a week of publication and has been translated into 17 languages. And I have to say, part of why this is so exciting is that Sally's book, How Women Rise, was actually the inspiration for me to start a book club called She Leads and Reads. So this is a real treat today. But that's not all she's authored. She has numerous other books, including The Female Advantage, Women's Ways of Leadership, which is hailed as a classic and continuously in print since 1990, The Female Vision, Women's Real Power at Work, which explores women's strategic insights and how they can strengthen their careers, and The Web of Inclusion, cited in the Wall Street Journal as one of the best books on leadership of all time. So again, thrilled to have Sally here. And so without further ado, let's bring her into the broadcast here. Hi, Sally, welcome.
Hi, good to be here. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, this is, like I said, just wonderful to have you here and talk about not only just how women rise, but, you know, as in the title, we talked about how that really benefits everybody, that it really is about lifting us all up, that when women rise, we're all elevated. Is there anything more you'd like to share in terms of an introduction for yourself or for the session?
No, just this has really been an experience here with How Women Rise. It is the 7th book I've done in the leadership field. But I think the reason it's been so remarkably successful is that it's very tactical in its approach, and that readers and participants in the workshops and seminars I do just walk away with lots of ideas. So I will be writing in this vein going forward because people really find it helpful. And the thing that's amazed me most is how helpful it is globally. And you know, whether you're in Japan or Brazil or Ukraine, our latest entry into publishers of How Women Rise, it's this seems to be pretty consistent. So it's been an exciting time for me.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons that I was so drawn by and to the book was as I'm reading, I realize, you know, we'll talk more about the book and that'll be kind of the main theme here today. But, you know, you talk about these 12 habits, and I definitely recognized myself in some of these habits and didn't even realize I was doing these things. It was, you know, these habits that were holding myself back. And so that was very eye-opening. And yeah, I appreciated the tangible suggestions. And you know, with the one with peer mentoring, that was where I thought, you know, let me start this book club, and this was our first selection. And that really was this action step that I could take to start to make change. So yeah, kudos on making it so tangible and practical and helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, it sounds in some ways, I feel silly even asking this question, but I do find it's helpful at the beginning of a dialogue to really lay out the most basic concept. And so, you know, let's start with the question of why. Like, why is it so important for women to rise?
Well, I'd say three reasons. First of all, we want to rise in order to realize our full potential. And that's satisfaction, that feeling of living a life that's satisfying, sustainable, and rewarding really comes when we're able to realize most of what our full potential is. So that's number one. It's that satisfaction for women who've, you know, often struggled in organizations. Secondly, as we rise, we become a resource for other women to rise. And it's really why, sometimes a comment I'll get, why and how women rise, you focus on women's behaviors, what they're doing to get in their own way. Why didn't you focus on culture or structure of organizations? That's what's holding women back. Well, in order to focus on culture and structure, you need some degree of positional power and some influence and authority. And then you're more likely to be able to help your organization make a cultural shift. So it's really also a way of helping other women to rise. And then finally, it's good for organizations. We don't even need to go into the piles of research over the last 10 or 15 years from McKinsey and elsewhere that have shown that organizations benefit in every way in terms of innovation, creativity, harmony, effective teams, return on investment when there are more women in leadership roles. So there are lots of reasons.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see that body of research grow, that not only, yes, we see how much more effective organizations are when you have women in leadership, but also overall diversity inclusion. When we see, those agencies, those businesses that are more diverse and inclusive, just how much better they do as an agency. It's been exciting to see that body of research grow. And that's a great point. Yeah. On the flip side, when we think about what happens when agencies don't have women in leadership and it's not this inclusive workplace, what are some of the things that can happen? What are the consequences or implications when we don't see that happening?
Well, there are multiple. First of all, when women aren't rising, women who are newer in the company tend to detach because they don't feel that they can really see a path forward for themselves. So right. You're wasting your investment in female talent if you're not very good at positioning women so they have the potential to rise. So that's a big problem. Again, but the research shows that in terms of creativity and solutions, when you don't have diverse people who are making decisions, they tend to make much more predictable decisions and behave in more predictable ways, and that's a real stumbling block when it comes to innovation. So every organization today, when you got a quickly changing, evolving technology curve, every organization has to continually innovate in order to be successful and even survive. So you want a talent force that is going to be fit for doing that. The other thing is, of course, organizations that, and I've worked with lots of companies that have this issue, organizations where women don't see a path toward the top. Women who are the most talented are just not very interested in joining them. So you also put yourself behind the curve on the talent sweepstakes, and you're basically drawing from one half of the population in order to fill your company's ranks. So it's a very poor long-term strategy given the nature of the economy, the emphasis, the need to innovate, and the reality of the global talent pool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's one of those things that seems like such common sense, and that's why I say it's funny to start out the conversation that way. But it's so important, I think, for us to really speak it and name it. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. In the book, towards the beginning, you talk about how when we talk about rising, that's going to be, rising and success. Those are very personal, individual measures, for us to figure out what that means for us. But also the impediments, those biggest obstacles that are going to be in our way are also personal and individual. Can you talk more about that concept and what that means?
Yeah, certainly. Well, the personal in regard to success means you get to define what success looks like for you. Maybe a high position is important. Maybe it's not. Maybe earning a lot of money is important. Maybe it's not that important. You've just got certain needs you want met. Maybe having a career where you do a lot of travel is important to you. Maybe one of your goals is to never leave the house, like us right now. But you get to define what success looks like for you. And it's a really important point, because often I've had women come up to me and say, I hear you, but, I don't really need to be a senior leader in this organization. Well, that's fine. I'm not advocating that, everybody has to be in a senior leadership position, but you do want to make sure that you are not frustrated in the job you have, in terms of your ability to be noticed and recognized for what you contribute, really honored in that way. You don't want to be stuck in terms of your capacity to build good relationships that will serve you and the organization well. You want that flexibility. So it's really important to remember you get to define what success looks like to you, and that it will change over time. What success looks like to you at 40 and what it looks like to you at 55 are often very different things. Now, in terms of the impediments, those are really what we're focusing on in How Women Rise, the habits and behaviors that are most likely to hold you back from rising to the position or the level that you aspire to put yourself in a situation where you're able to really do what you want to do and have a great time and work with the people that you want to work with. So any habits and behaviors that hold you back from that's the personal aspect of the impediment.
Yeah, I love everything you just said there, but especially I just want to draw out the piece where you said that it will change, how we, not only is it individual, but it will change. And I think realizing that that's okay, giving yourself permission to have those different definitions of success. And, I've definitely seen evidence of that in my life. What I thought in my 20s and 30s would be my ultimate measure of success, then you get there. Well, if that was your only measure and it never changed, then, so being willing to give yourself permission to change your mind, and also to keep setting those new goals. I think that's a great point. I think sometimes we fail to give ourselves that that permission to change. So one of the other concepts in the book that I really love, you talk about the idea of stuckness. So can you talk more about what that means, that concept of stuckness, and why that's so important?
It's a really important concept. Being stuckness really means that we have something that a way we would like our life or our career to be, but we can't get there. And the efforts we make, we think, oh, I've got a plan. This will work. This will be helpful. Maybe I'll engage this person. Maybe I'll do this, but it's not working. If it's not working and you're expecting it to work, then you're stuck. And it means that you need to take a fresh look at what could be getting in your way. And that's really why I got onto this idea of looking at these habits and behaviors and How Women Rise, is because I've been doing these women's leadership workshops for 30 years. And I could see the same, when women would talk about their challenges, I could see some of the same challenges coming up over and over. And I could see that the way that they were trying to get around them, it was clear it wasn't working for them. So what I was urging for them to do is to take a step back and reflect and try to think, what am I doing that may be getting in my way? Because this is the important thing. What you're doing is what you can control. What other people are doing, how they think about you, this organization's always been this way or that way. That's not within your control, but your own habits and behaviors are. So you want to look at that is a very powerful way of trying to address stuckness.
Yeah, that's great, because, as you mentioned at the very beginning, I think sometimes we do get so caught up in those things we can't control, and the other systems and these other pieces, that not that we shouldn't work to change them, but we get so almost obsessed with looking there and not looking at, okay, what can I control? What might I be doing that is helping or hindering my own progress? And being willing to have that honest reflection. That's a key piece of being able to move forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that is tied to this, but is slightly different, is that we often struggle with change. So even if we've recognized maybe what we should change, we struggle then to actually do that. Why is it that we struggle so much with change? Why is it so hard, Sally?
Change is so hard. It's really hard. And it's important that everybody recognize it's hard. And especially in a culture like ours, where we're used to making New Year's resolutions and I'm going to do all these 10 things differently and lose 10 pounds and start, running every day, whatever. Changing anything that we do habitually is very difficult. And, there are neurological reasons for that. The pathways in our brain get accustomed to doing something a certain way. They send us signals, like you're on a diet is, of course, always the easiest example. You're on a diet. You usually, have a mid-morning snack. Well, now I'm not eating between meals, so I'm not having the mid-morning snack. And then about 11 o'clock, your brain's saying, hey, wait a minute, where's my mid-morning snack? Please. So we're getting these signals. And the only way we can deal with that is to change. So once we've been, anybody's had this experience, once you've been doing it for a week, once you haven't had that 11 o'clock snack for a week, you're like, oh, wow, it's 1 o'clock. I didn't even think of it. That's how it changes. Any kind of addiction, this is how it works. And so we get comfortable. Our brain gets uncomfortable when we do things differently because it's taking the path of least resistance neurologically. So in order to make a change, we have to practice it, which is why it's really important to do one thing at a time. We need to practice it until we build those neural pathways where we have some degree of comfort. And the thing that is remarkable is how much people can actually change as long as they understand and have a plan for doing so and don't try to change everything at once. It used to be this idea, this whole concept of adult neuroplasticity, which means your brain can evolve in adulthood. Nobody believed it until about 15 years ago, till they started looking at people doing things with functional MRIs, and then it all changed. So now we know the good news is we can change pretty much anything in terms of behaviors. And also we know that it's hard and takes persistence.
Yeah, it's a great point that not only, yes, can we do it, but we have to be patient with ourselves and have that persistence. But another key piece is, picking one or two things. And I say the same thing when I'm working with people as they're coaching employees and team members on change. I say, don't give them a laundry list of things that they need to improve. That's not fair. You're setting them up for failure. Pick one or two things to hone in on. So that's a great point as well. And there's one other piece in this concept of change that can you write about in the book, and it tends to have us resist change a little bit, maybe subconsciously. You talk about the excessive need to be me. So what does that concept mean, and how does that relate to our resistance to change?
Well, that's actually one of the habits in Marshall's original book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is about the habits and behaviors most likely to get in the way of successful people. That was really the original spur for me to suggest that we collaborate on How Women Rise, because I saw a lot of those habits and behaviors weren't really a problem for women, and that many of the habits and behaviors that I saw being a problem for women weren't in there. But certainly some of them have an overlap and are gender neutral. And I would say this is one that is, we will often feel that we're almost being disloyal to ourselves when we try to change something that we view as fundamental and as part of our identity. And you hear people do this all the time. Let me take myself. I'm very impatient. Well, I'm just very impatient. I'm very impatient. I can tell myself that, and then I can exhibit impatient behaviors in ways that don't serve me. I'm giving myself an out because I'm saying, well, it's just the way I am. I'm wired that way. I'm an impatient person. As I've said before, we can change these things, but it takes, first of all, to not buy into that idea of, I got to be me. This is me. This is who I am. I can't do it any differently. If we want to progress through life and have a, real satisfying experience, it's a good idea to leave some of those self-limiting beliefs about who we are behind, because they serve us as great excuses not to change in ways that actually would benefit us more.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because I think we have this tendency to conflate self-limiting beliefs and maybe limiting characteristics with, well, that's just my authentic self. So that's just me. So yes, if I change that, that's not my authentic self. And it's recognizing those things, that your authentic self can be your character and these other deeper parts of what makes you you. But if something is a self-limiting belief or behavior, it's not serving you to hold on to it as part of your identity. You're not doing yourself any favors. But I think we have a tendency to conflate those. So that's a great point.
Yeah, it's a kind of a byproduct of this idea of, everybody's got to be very authentic, and we're urged to be authentic. And of course, being authentic, nobody wants to be talking to somebody who's a clear fraud. And there are plenty of those out there in the world, and we know what they look like. But at the same time, if you're too loyal to a picture of yourself that's very limiting, or else also a picture of yourself that you may have outgrown, it can really it can undermine you.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we have a question from the audience that I'll bring in here. So Marcia says, oh, and I don't have my glasses on, so we'll see if I can read this. Maybe I have to put them on.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about women who enter into their field and work alongside other women who may not be on the same journey to grow? That's an interesting question. So you're working side by side with other women who aren't on that same journey. What are your thoughts about that, and any feedback or advice for Marcia?
Certainly. One of the most helpful things I ever learned was this little sort of rubric that was in the old self-help book from the early 90s, maybe late 80s, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in that book, the author, Stephen Covey, talks about, he has a little diagram, and he says, this is your circle of concern, and this is your circle of control. So in your circle of control is all the things that you actually have control over. And in your circle of concern should closely match your circle of control. That's a recipe for an effective life. So if things aren't, you're concerned about a lot of things that you can't control, then that's going to undermine you. So the journey other people are on is definitely something that you don't have control over. You have control over your own journey. That doesn't mean you're cold. That doesn't mean you're disinterested. That means you don't care about them. But it does mean that you're much better off to focus on your own journey and not get distracted by, why isn't this person? And you'd think that person would. And, it would be more helpful to me if all these people would. It's not within your circle of control. So you want to try to edge it out of your circle of concern.
That's powerful. And I think it's hard. It can be frustrating when you are wanting to go on this journey, you'd like others to come with you. And if they're not there, that can be disappointing and frustrating. And, I think then it's maybe finding other people who are willing to go on that journey with you. Maybe those women aren't there. But if you want people to be a part of that with you, finding people who are wanting to take that journey.
And, having worked with a lot of people who've had pretty remarkable and successful careers, what happened is they stuck with what they wanted to do, and then other people were attracted to that, so that they began to form a circle. You become an attractor rather than someone looking to fit in.
That's true. Yeah, that's a great point.
Or to fit other people in.
Yeah. So in the book, we've kind of mentioned this, but we haven't really dug in. There, you identify the 12 habits that tend to hold women back. As you mentioned, you're going to these conferences and you're hearing these same challenges over and over. And we won't go through all 12. We'll let people, get the book if they want to, if they want to go through all and learn what all 12 are. But is there one of the habits that you tend to see, most frequently, that women really, really struggle with most frequently, or one or two that seem to be the most troublesome?
Well, of the ones that I get the people who most identify with, and I can pretty much say this with some assurance, because when I'm going to do a program for a company, when I do an hour or 90 minutes, I focus on 3 or 4 habits in the book. So what I ask them to do is to send out a quiz before, like a survey monkey, using this behavior sheet I have, and have the women identify, what do I most identify with? And there is one habit that almost never doesn't come up, and that is expecting others to spontaneously notice and value your contributions. Feeling reluctant about, yes, you're probably identifying with it right now.
I did, yes.
I am too. But feeling reluctant to be really clear about what you've contributed. Oh, somebody might think I'm bragging. Somebody might think I'm all about me. What about stepping on my team members' contributions if I talk about myself? So have that dialogue in your head. So you don't really want to talk about what you've done. So you choose the path of, well, if I do a really great job, people will notice. I expect people. I hear people say that. I expect people will notice. Hello, good luck. People are busy. Yep. People are focused on their own thing. They're not necessarily noticing everything that you do, or the people that you need to notice in your organization aren't noticing yet. So that expectation can lead to profound disappointment. And you want to avoid becoming disappointed. The older I get, the more I see that disappointment is something that really is really a poisonous feeling. So you want to avoid being disappointed in other people and expecting things of them. So you need to have a real strategy for bringing attention to what your contributions are, and also for bringing awareness of where you're trying to go in the world. I mean, I've had, there's an example in the book, I think this is in the book, where it was a woman I worked with, was in a law firm, and she did not make partner the year that her cohort, which was almost all male, made partner. So she was preparing to leave. She'd gotten a couple invitations she'd been solicited by a couple of her company's clients for jobs in general counsel. And she was looking at taking them. And she said something to her practice head. And he said, "Oh, what can we do to keep you?" And he said, "What if we made you partner?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I thought I was going to be made partner. I wasn't. That's the reason I'm looking here." He said, "Well, we didn't know you wanted to be partner." Thinking, she's expecting he'll notice, okay, she's working 80 hours a week. Maybe she wants to be partner. No, he didn't notice. And he said those guys who got made partner, they started talking about it from the day they were here. They were talking about they wanted to make partners. So we knew that they did. So much for expecting people to notice that you're staying every night till 11:30 because you want to make partner. So you've got to be a little bit clear and a little bit explicit. And I find that very, very common.
I definitely identified with, the reluctance to, expecting other people to spontaneously notice, and reluctance to claim. As I was reading those, it was literally like you had just picked it right out of my brain, the way that you were describing those behaviors, and especially, yes, expecting people to just notice and being disappointed and almost offended. Like, how did you not notice that I did such a great job with that, or that I worked so hard? So that was very eye-opening and enlightening, to be able to hear that and put a name to it and realize how much that was setting me back. And it almost, again, also gives you permission, because I think we have this tendency to feel like we're being, braggadocious, or, and so to hear, no, that's what you need to do. It's permission to do that. It was very empowering as well, and very, very helpful.
It goes back a little bit to that circle of concern and circle of control I was talking about, because very often I'll ask, well, why didn't you talk about that you did that? Well, I didn't want somebody to think I was fill in the blanks, arrogant, all about me, overly ambitious, whatever. So what that is you're putting more energy into trying to manage other people's perceptions, which after all lie outside your circle of control, then into being clear and direct about what you've done and what you hope to do, which lies within your circle of control. So it's that, what I've seen, that there are a number of habits in this book, and I didn't realize this when I wrote it, that really evolve because you're focused on trying to manage perceptions.
Yeah, spot on. That makes a lot of sense. And like you said, that's out of our circle of control. So yeah.
I was doing this right before the pandemic. I was signing some books in the lobby of a hotel I was staying in outside of San Diego. And I just set up shop there because I had 500 books to sign, and I didn't feel like doing them in my room, so I had them set them up there, and I was signing, and this woman walked by, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, I saw you on a program." I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yeah, circle of concern, circle of control." So I like being like that. Thank you, Stephen Covey.
Right? That's great. So after, we talked a little bit ago about, how it can be hard to change, but it is possible. So once we identify, those bad habits that apply to us, how can we work to help change those habits and to move beyond those limitations?
Well, there are a couple things. We have, have in the book specific ways you can address the habits, those specific habits. But it's also important to understand, and I think it's really helpful to know, that there is a sort of template for changing any habit or behavior that you feel gets in your way. And this is more characterological. We're not talking about being on a diet or running, although it probably works for that too, actually, the more I think about it. But it's a 4-step process, and I'm going to talk about the first two. The first one is choose one thing. Women come up, "Oh, I have 9 habits. I don't know where to start. I have 12. I don't know what to," start with one habit, start with one part of a habit. I'm going to be more concise in my presentations in that one meeting I have every week. So it's a part of a habit. And forget the rest. Start with that one thing. Choose whatever looks easiest. Don't start with the hardest thing. A couple of the habits here are really tough. The perfection trap, very, very tough. Don't start there. Getting over being a perfectionist is a work in progress. And then once you have, although, there's specific things you can do to address that, but once you have decided what you're going to work on, and then you think about all the specific ways you could work on it. And this, I cannot stress the importance of this enough. Engage somebody to help you. Marshall did this extraordinary research where he looked into what were the things that over 800,000 people who had made significant, positive, long-term behavioral change, what did they have in common? And the number one thing they had in common is that they didn't do it alone. They worked with a coach, they worked with a peer coach, or they just got people on their team to help them with something in a more informal way. And one of the things that I use a lot in the workshops I do is a practice of informal enlistment. So you're just asking somebody. Take that example I used earlier of, I'm going to try to be more concise in this meeting. So you make that decision, you choose that one thing, then you choose someone in the meeting. Hey, I'm really working on trying to be more concise, and I'm going to practice in this meeting coming up next Friday that you're going to be part of as well. This works as well virtually as it did when we were all still in offices together. I'm going to work on it. And could you give me any feedback afterwards? How you think I'm doing, if there's something I could do that would help me be more concise. I'm dealing with this habit of too much right here, as you see. Too much information, too much background, too many details, too much emotion, whatever that is. It's a communication habit, so you enlist that person to help you. And then even if you find you're struggling with something, a couple sessions in, you could say, I keep seeming to stumble over this one thing that I'm doing. If you notice me starting to go into it, you've been watching me now for a couple of weeks, could you just give me a little signal to remind me?
Right.
Or you can do it more, you're okay. I'm working to get more concise. But I noticed you're really good at that. Is there anything you do? Is there a preparation? Most people who are concise are prepared. That's part of it.
Right.
I went to a funeral last year, and there were 3 people who gave wonderful, wonderful, beautiful eulogies. And there were 2 people, one guy got up there and said, well, I've been trying to think about what I'd say. And I thought, oh, really? You're doing this?
No, right.
Say no if you can't put in the prep time.
Goodness.
And then he started making comments about how good the people who'd gone before him were. Well, guess what? They were prepared.
Yeah.
So, find out what people who are really good do and try to practice and adapt those practices. It's really powerful because you're not doing it alone. You have support. You're advertising that you're changing. You're going to get new ideas. It's just a really terrific way of changing something.
Yeah, that's absolutely the accountability partner or accountability buddy, however you want to call it, is huge for sure. So I think that's a great suggestion. And along with that, getting an ally, somebody to help you out. You also write in the book about how, and this I think is more towards the beginning of the book, how sometimes organizations can make it hard for people to change. So we find it hard ourselves to change, but sometimes organizations can make it hard for people to change. Can you talk more about what that means, why they might make it hard to change, and then maybe some things we can do as leaders to remove some of those obstacles?
Yes, organizations can make it very hard to change because they pigeonhole you, based on your earlier performance, based on perceptions they may have had about you in the past. They'll stick with those until they're, you hit them over the head with, hey, did you notice I'm doing things differently now? Which is why informal enlistment can be very powerful. But, I've seen this with people who start speaking up in a meeting. I'm speaking up, oh, she's the one who sits in the back of the room. You haven't done that in a year, but that's how people remember you. So that becomes something that can really hold you back, is those perceptions, those ideas that people have about what you're doing. So that's why it's helpful to have allies. That's helpful to, you can even go into a meeting where you've had some feedback that you were, apologizing too much or whatever. You can say, I've had some feedback, I apologize too much. I'm going to work really hard in this meeting not to apologize. Just putting it out there. And then people will notice, oh, she stopped apologizing. Otherwise, they'll think you're still apologizing when you stopped last year. So it's good to help. That's a positive way of managing expectations because it's within your circle of control and it's taking action.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I can definitely see that. I can see how, it's almost like that the first impression, it sticks with somebody, those initial behaviors, those just become the expectations. And I can see that it would be very difficult to change those expectations. And I think that's where, yes, the individual can, as you said, enlist an ally and then share and speak up. But that's also where, we can put some of that expectation responsibility on leaders to have those check-ins and ask, the employee or the team member some of those questions to, say, what have you been working on? And, just to try and get some of that information and help make themselves aware and stay tuned in as well. I would think that would help some of that as well. Yeah.
Again, can't do it alone. It's just not that effective.
Right. Are there other ways that, are there ways that I guess men can be allies and or other women, thinking back to Marcia's question too about maybe having an ally, but are there things that men and or women can do to be allies for one another and help women rise?
Well, one thing I've noticed what's been interesting is the book has been used a lot by men in organizations to try to have a better grasp of what some of the factors are that are holding women back from a point of view that they haven't understood. Like I don't know why she won't speak up when she's got an idea, these various things. Or so that's one of the things I found that they're finding it very helpful. And I've actually even had a lot of men say that it's really helpful to them with their daughters as well, because it really gets at some of the real issues, that some of the real stuff that women put on themselves. And I'd say that that's true for women as well. To be an effective ally or mentor, it's helpful to have some rough diagnostic of what may be getting in the way of the person you're trying to help. So I think putting it in the form that it's in this book, which is very much based on a coaching experience and coaching template, is good because it sort of takes away the fault finding. We're all people. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have things that get in our way. We all need to work on our behaviors if we want to be more effective and have more satisfying and productive and rewarding lives. So here are some of the things that are very common, and here are some ways to work on them. So I think that's a very positive message, rather than sometimes mentors, if they don't have that, will get judgmental. Well, I don't know. She never talks. She never speaks up. Or, oh God, if she has to apologize to me one more time, I'm going to run screaming from the room. Well, just this depathologizes it in a way. It just, this is common, and these things happen. Why do they happen? They happen because of our experiences. So, it's helpful in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about, when I was reading the book and discovering and realizing and having these epiphanies that I was like, oh wait, yes, I do that. And so if I wasn't even aware that these were common behaviors that I was displaying, to think that somebody else is going to have the vocabulary or the knowledge without, like I could see where having the book and being able to put a name to that and understand the behavior would be so powerful. Because if it was that powerful for me and I'm the one doing it, so for somebody who's not living that every day, that'd be very educational. Yeah. So I like to, usually my last question that I offer up, if there's anything additional that you'd like to share. Are there any, key don'ts and or do's that you like to share with people?
Well, you may have gotten the hint from this conversation that I think a big don't is over apologizing. It's one of those minimizing behaviors. We've got a whole chapter in the book about minimizing, which can be either through your words, lots of things like, I just have one thing to add, or this may not be important. There's a good opener. Or it can be a physical minimizing of your body, like the message, I don't belong here. But it amazes me the extent to which women still apologize. And to me, it's even highlighted on Zoom. Now that we're all on Zoom, I was on a meeting yesterday morning, very accomplished woman who's a well-known coach. And she came in, she was about a half a second late. Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. Wait a minute, you're half a second late? What are you talking about? And then her next thing is, I'm sorry about my background, but I'm, and then this explanation, who cared? It was just a meeting. It's not, a state occasion. And she had about three things in a row. Everything started with, I'm sorry. And this was an accomplished and successful coach in her early 50s. So I'm still amazed by how persistent that is, because I think of it as it's a behavior that diminishes you, but it's also, what I begin to realize is it's kind of presumptuous as well. It's like when you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a quarter of a second late, then it's like you've all been waiting for me. So it's irritating. And so to me, it has emerged just watching things evolve. And again, things are a little different in the Zoom world, in the world of virtual platforms. Some things get highlighted, some things fade into the background. So I think that's a really a big one. Downplaying your skills. Well, that really wasn't very hard. It kind of fits in that category. That's a real don't. Another don't, which is common and part of a number of the habits in the book, is feeling that if you just work as hard as possible, you'll be rewarded. It's a little different than the expecting others to notice. Sometimes you're thinking, well, if I just do the work, then I will be promoted because I will have done the best job. Not recognizing that the person who does the best job is not necessarily always or often even chosen for the next job, because all they've done is prove that they're great at doing the job they have. So those are some of the things I think that are really, see, I wrote a little, and also not listening. And again, I think that the virtual world, which we're now very much a part of, but I think will be with us to a much larger extent than it has been before the pandemic, it really highlights whether you listen or not in a way that surprises me. You can tell when people are listening. You can tell when they're kind of calculating, okay, when will this be over and I get to say my piece? Or when they're doing something else, like, oh, well, yeah, it's very interesting. It shows up in a way that is really something. So I think those are all things to look out for.
Yeah. Any key do's? Maybe
do's.
Just the opposite of you.
Do's. I think in terms of your allies. Think in terms of your who. Think in terms of who do you want to be identified with. I've, for myself, one of the things I've been thinking about recently has been, what lineage do I want to be a part of? What is my lineage in the professional and work world? And how do I claim my place there? So I think often we see ourselves and what we do in very kind of a standalone thing. And really our allies, who we are connected with, that's a big part of our brand. It is the key aspect of our support system. So I think always thinking of that and having this, I've said this in a lot of programs, but I don't think it's in the book because it's something I came to since, that any successful career is really built on three legs: expertise, connections, and visibility. And often women over focus on expertise, feeling that that's the answer. And that leaves them, doing a lot more work, getting a lot less help, and being a lot less visible. So it's not a great path. And we want to always think in terms of what are the connections we're building? How are we helping those people? How can those people help us? It's a joint effort. And as I go through life, that just becomes ever, ever more apparent to me.
Wow. I loved everything you just said. That was amazing. I love the concept of, thinking about and being intentional about your lineage, your professional lineage. That's a beautiful concept. I love that. And that last piece there too about, enlisting our allies and I forget the exact term you just used, but because I'm thinking about what's in the book, but that we have this reluctance to kind of leverage our network, that we're great at making relationships and making connections with people, but we don't always leverage, like we feel guilty about leveraging. And I think the more and more as women that we can recognize that, again, it's benefiting us all. You're not using somebody. Well, as long as you're not using somebody, it's just, it's working within that network, expanding your network and cultivating those relationships in a way that you can help lift each other up. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And we should do that. So that's great advice. Love that. Yeah. Anything else that you would like to share with people? Any other words of wisdom or?
Yeah, you know, I've the sort of model I use when I do workshops, I put these behaviors in certain buckets. I talk about the ones that relate to lacking sufficient intention in terms of your career and what you're trying to achieve. So look at the things that help you build attention. I look at the things that get in the way of building really effective connections, leveraging them as you wrote. I look at the habits that can really particularly undermine you as you seek to move to senior positions. And those would be the perfection trap and disease to please. And I also look at the habits that undermine your ability to be present. So I think a very useful conversation for women to have with one another and to really reflect on themselves is taking all of those, framing them in you know, how intentional am I being, and how am I connecting with people, and how present am I? Because really the communication habits in the book, addressing them helps you have a much stronger, clearer presence and be more present for the people in front of you, for the work you intend to do, for your purpose, for your task, for who you are in the world. So I like to think of these habits not just as discrete things that we can address and get better at, but as components that enable us to be more intentional, connected, and present in terms of our leadership style and how we show up. And I think it's a useful, I hesitate to use the word model because I think one of the reasons this book has been so successful and what I've learned from it is that people really like tactics, and the worst thing you can do is start something off. Let me tell you about my leadership model. Oh, really? That's helpful. But this is a kind of a model, and their habits tied to it. And that's what I would like to see. I would like to see women becoming more intentional, much more connected, and better able to translate a strong, confident, clear leadership presence. Because I think those couple things would go a long way.
Yeah, agreed. That would be wonderful. I would love to see that as well. I hope that for myself and for my daughter, and and I hope that for all of us women, because I agree. I think when women rise, we all rise. We're all better for it. So yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sally. So I will include in the video description, I will make sure we have links to your website and to social media, but I always like to give guests the opportunity to just share where's the best place for people to find you and connect with you.
Either on LinkedIn, that's where I respond, or my website, sallyhelgesen.com. I have a contact button there, and I get multiple inquiries every day through that contact button. So it really works.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And our guests are saying thank you, Marcia. Thank you for your response earlier, your answer to her question. She appreciated that. And Sarah is saying thank you so much. And from me as well, thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights with us. They are absolutely fantastic. So thank you.
My pleasure, Kelly. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.